10 of the bloodiest battles in history that you may not have heard of before. Number 10. The Battle of Magnesia. Fought in 190 BC, Magnesia was the final battle of the Roman Seleucid War, and was fought in western Anatolia, which is in modern-day Turkey. The Romans inflicted a heavy defeat on the Seleucid Empire, and are estimated to have lost just 300 men compared to losses of over 50,000 for the Seleucid Empire. By modern standards, this number may seem low, but bear in mind that these casualties were all inflicted up close and personal, by spear and sword. Number 9. The Battle of Plataea. Taking place in 479 BC, this giant battle pit a Greek city-state alliance that included Sparta and Athens against the might of the Persian Empire. This was the final battle of the second Persian invasion of Greece, and it's not hard to see why. Ancient sources put the Persian losses at between 300,000 to 500,000 men. Although such numbers are most probably ancient Greek propaganda, it is clear that the invading Persians suffered a bloody and convincing defeat. Suddenly things escalated as the Greek lines appeared to break and retreat, whilst falling back to a new defensive position. Seizing what they saw as a golden opportunity, the Persians attacked. However, the Greek heavy infantry stood their ground and crushed the lighter Persian infantry. The majority of the remaining Persian forces were trapped in their camp and put to the sword by the wrathful Greeks, thus ending the second Persian invasion of Greece. Number 8. The Battle of Leipzig. Also known as the Battle of the Nations, this battle was epic in scale, and took place between the 16th and 19th of October, 1813, at Leipzig in Saxony, which is in modern-day Germany. On one side were the allied forces of Russia, Sweden, Austria and Prussia. Opposing them, the might of Napoleonic France, backed up with Polish, Italian and German soldiers, involving nearly 600,000 troops, and with total casualties estimated in the range of 100,000. This was the largest pre-World War I battle in Europe, and the bloodiest battle of the Napoleonic War. The use of over 2,000 cannons, and such concentrated numbers of troops, account for the bloody nature of this battle, and Leipzig was a grim foreshadowing of the horrors of modern warfare that the world would be experiencing just 100 years in the future. Leipzig also marked the first time that Napoleon was decisively defeated, and he was shortly after forced to abdicate and sent into exile on Elba. Number 7. The Battle of Mukden. This was the last major land battle of the Russo-Japanese War, and took place from the 20th of February to the 10th of March 1905, near Mukden in Manchuria. The Russian army of 340,000 men were defending against an attacking Japanese army of 280,000, making it the largest battle since the Battle of Leipzig back in 1813. By the end of the battle, 88,000 Russian and 75,000 Japanese losses had been inflicted, for a total of 163,000 casualties. Almost encircled by the onslaught of the Japanese, the Russian army was forced to retreat in disorder, and Russia was pushed out of southern Manchuria permanently. Europeans were left in shock that such a small Asian empire could defeat a massive and powerful European empire in open battle. The myth of European invincibility had been shattered. Number 6. The Battle of Kursk. One of the largest armoured battles in history, Kursk was the scene of an incredible level of death and destruction on both the German and Soviet sides. Taking place during the Second World War in July 1943, the Battle of Kursk is considered the final strategic German offensive on the Eastern Front, and involved over 8,000 tanks and 3 million soldiers. The Soviets were warned well in advance of the German offensive, and as such had ample time to prepare their defences. By the time the German attack came, they were faced with a 155-mile deep network of anti-tank guns, minefields and deep defences. The attack was halted and the German army was pushed back. It's estimated that by the end of the offensive, a total of 250,000 casualties had been inflicted on both sides, along with the loss of over 3,000 tanks and assault guns. The losses suffered by the Germans and the utter failure of the offensive makes the Battle of Kursk one of the major turning points of World War II. Number 5. The Battle of Didgori. Fought on August 12, 1121, between the Kingdom of Georgia and the Seljuk Empire, the Battle of Didgori involved an estimated 300,000 to 600,000 men, depending on which sources you believe, and resulted in as many as 400,000 casualties, although this figure is somewhat unreliable. At this time the Kingdom of Georgia was a tributary of the much larger Seljuk Empire to the south. However, having had great success during the First Crusade, King David IV of Georgia was able to reclaim lands that had been previously lost, and bolstered by this success, he ended all tribute to the Seljuks in 1096. Concerned by the activities of this upstart Christian kingdom, the Seljuks marched a coalition of Muslim armies into the Georgian valley of Trialeti to crush all opposition. Although the numbers involved are disputed, it's accepted that the Georgians were massively outnumbered, with perhaps just 50,000 men against anywhere from 200,000 to 600,000 Seljuks. The Georgian king had secretly deployed a large portion of his army in a pincer movement and attacked head-on with the remainder of his forces. The Seljuk army broke under the onslaught, escaping through a gap in the rear. However, few of them would live to see their homes again. The Georgian cavalry relentlessly pursued the fleeing Seljuk soldiers, putting the majority of them to the sword. Number 4. The Battle of Narva. Fought in Estonia over the course of 6 months in 1944, this was one of the bloodiest battles between the Germans and the Soviets on the Eastern Front, with estimated casualties of over 500,000, nearly 90% of which were suffered by the Soviet army. The battle was set into motion at the insistence of Stalin, who wanted to seize control of Estonia to use as a base for future attacks against Finland and East Prussia. Holding well-fortified defensive positions behind the river Narva, the Germans made the Red Army pay dearly for Stalin's ambitions and demonstrated that the war was far from over. Number 3. The Battle of Wuhan. Part of the Second Sino-Japanese War, the Battle of Wuhan was giant in scale and took place between the 11th of June and 27th of October 1938. 1 million Chinese soldiers were gathered to defend the city of Wuhan against an attacking army of 350,000 Japanese. Wuhan was the second largest city in China at the time and had become the major economic, political and military hub of the country, and as such its defense was vital. To delay the attacking Japanese, the Chinese made the decision to open up the dikes of the Yellow River. The resulting flood did delay the Japanese army, but at the cost of 500,000 civilian deaths. This action gave the Chinese time to bolster their defences, and although the city was eventually lost, the heavy casualties suffered by the Japanese meant that no further offensives were launched in China until 1944. Japanese hopes of destroying the main Chinese army and forcing a surrender were dashed. By the end of the battle, 400,000 Chinese and 140,000 Japanese casualties had been inflicted for a total of 540,000 casualties. Number 2. The Battle of Changping. More massacre than battle. This slaughter took place in ancient China in July 260 BC between the warring states of Qin and Zhao. En route to a Qin fortress, the Zhao army of over 400,000 men was surrounded and trapped by the Qin. After 46 days under siege and multiple attempts to break out of the trap, the Zhao army ran out of food and water and surrendered. The captured soldiers were executed and are said to have been put to death by being buried alive. Only 240 of the 400,000 strong Zhao army were allowed to live, and they were released to spread terror of the events that took place to the rest of their countrymen. The Qin forces did not escape unscathed either, taking over 150,000 casualties during the battle, for a total of over 650,000 combined losses at Changping. The Zhao were left broken, paving the way for the Qin to unite all of China in 221 BC. Number 1. The Battle of Borodino. Fought on September 7th, 1812, between 190,000 French and 160,000 Russian soldiers, by the end of a single day of combat, 70,000 casualties had been inflicted, making it the deadliest single day of the entire Napoleonic War. Even by modern warfare standards, this rate of casualties for just one day of combat is staggering, but when you consider that no automatic weapons or modern technology were being used, in my view this becomes the bloodiest single battle in history. The battle took place during Napoleon's invasion of Russia, and the Russian stand at Borodino was their last-ditch effort to prevent the French from taking Moscow. Although the Russians were pushed back, and Moscow lost just a week later, the Russian army was not decisively defeated, and as such, Napoleon was unable to force a Russian surrender. The Russians simply retreated back into the vastness of their country and continued to defy Napoleon. With 35,000 French casualties suffered, Borodino is considered a Pyrrhic victory for Napoleon. Battered, exhausted, undersupplied and overstretched, the French army was forced to eventually retreat back from Moscow in terrible winter conditions, losing many more thousands to the cold, starvation and disease. So that's my choice for 10 of history's bloodiest battles. Which battles did I miss? Leave a comment below on which battles you would have included.